Well, we can't thank you enough for wanting to come and meet with the group of people. You know, our door is always open to you.
Thank you.
And, you know, on behalf of Easter Seals, we really appreciate the work that you did as governor and as our senator. So thank you so much.
Well, thank
and
you.
welcome. And we're going to let you take it from here.
Well, thank you. Why don't we just start by going around? I think everybody knows everybody, but let's just make sure we all have each other's names and your organization and what brings you here. Start with you.
So Christina Fitzpatrick with AARP New Hampshire. And
Yeah,
AARP has been doing a lot of work about support for family caregivers, and so want to share that information and also thank you for the leadership you've shown in the Senate around introducing bills to
Thank you.
support family care.
Thanks.
Good morning, Senator. Bill Sherry from Brandon United Way, and I'll be speaking a little bit today about what we're seeing in 211 in
Yeah.
terms of calls from seniors.
Okay, great.
Amy Moore, Century Care Alliance. We serve about 400 individuals throughout the state that are nursing home local care, keeping them in their home. Also the vice chair of the Home Care Hospice Palliative Care Alliance.
Great, great.
I'm Sue Selsby. I'm the vice president here at Easter Seals, and I've been here for 35 years working in the long-term supports and services arena. So
That's
we serve a lot of
fabulous.
people, and happy to share what we've learned.
Yeah, great.
Evelyn Barkham. I'm a volunteer with Easter Seals. I keep doing that. AARP. I work for you.
Now you have to sign something and make it real.
Yeah.
But I've done my share of volunteering for Easter Seals
Yes.
as well. And I've been with AARP for 10 years. And I was asked to come today to speak as a caregiver.
Okay, thank you. And Maureen, thank you for gathering the group, and thanks to you and Easter Seals for welcoming this kind of discussion, but also really for the care that you provide to so many community members. And thank you all for taking time to be here this morning, because I know I'm looking at a very busy group of people, so I really appreciate it. I want to kick off our discussion in a minute, but I also just wanted to take this opportunity to update all of you and the greater public who may get information from this roundtable about some of the progress we've made to help bring down costs for seniors, but also lay out the work that's still ahead of us, because we've obviously got a lot of work to do. As you know, seniors, like a lot of Granite Staters, have been really feeling the pain of higher costs, particularly around healthcare and prescription medications, the things you really absolutely have to do and have to buy. And for seniors, especially those living on fixed incomes, this is really tough and really leads to painful choices at times. So, you know, if your doctor says, hey, I have a better blood thinner for you, but it is a more expensive drug, you have to figure out, should I do that, or is that going to mean I can't pay the rent or I can't pay my heating bill? Can I manage to stay in the home that I raised my family in and that I love and where I know my community, while also paying a caregiver, or am I going to have to make the difficult choice to go into a smaller home in order to do that? So these are the kinds of really difficult decisions that seniors are having to make in New Hampshire and all across the country. And so one of the things that we've really been focused on in Congress is, and with the Biden administration, is how do we help in some tangible, important ways. So some of the good news is we have taken really important steps to bring down some of these costs. And that's in large part because of the advocacy of seniors and the AARP. You know, never underestimate the ability of people to make a difference when you really talk about your experiences and your challenges, especially in a democracy. And so we have some real tangible examples of how this democracy has delivered because of the advocacy of people in this room and beyond. We passed a law in 2022 called the Inflation Reduction Act that caps the cost of insulin at $35 a month. I remember the first time I talked to a constituent about this. I was in a restaurant somewhere and was saying hello, and when I told this woman who's a Medicare recipient that insulin would now be capped, she and her husband sat there and did the math that moment about how much more money they would have in their monthly budget because of that provision in the Inflation Reduction Act. It also allows Medicare to actually negotiate prescription drug coverage. As you all know, for years there's been a prohibition in the law that says that Medicare can't do what any other business would do in its shoes, which is actually negotiate the cost. So that's been a really important step forward. We have already seen some of this negotiation taking place on some of the most expensive and highly used prescription drugs in the country, and we're beginning to see pharmaceutical companies voluntarily reduce their costs or cap them because they don't want to be in negotiations with Medicare, so they're trying to just cap them up front. And so recently, a pharmaceutical company that provides inhalers has agreed to cap the cost of their inhalers. Among other things that the law did too was, as of this year, limits out-of-pocket costs for seniors on Medicare to $3,300. Next year that will go down to $2,000. So we are seeing some progress in the Medicare space. The other thing is, and this is less known, the law says that if a pharmaceutical company increases the price of one of its drugs by a rate higher than the rate of inflation, they will have to pay the extra money back to the government, and Medicare can use that. It's primarily going to use it to try to lower premiums for people on Medicare. But that's another way that we're kind of putting pressure on the pharmaceutical companies to lower their costs and make sure that they're not jacking up prices just because they can, which is, of course, what they've been doing for a long time. There's, of course, more work to do. Because even as we've made progress with these laws, the drug companies, some of the drug companies are still fighting us. Some of them are currently suing the government to try to prevent Medicare from negotiating drug prices. And big pharmaceutical companies also, some of them continue to game the patent system to keep prices sky high, or they use other kinds of loopholes to block the entry of generic drugs into the marketplace. So we're going to keep pushing because we can't relent until we bring these prices down. It's just unconscionable that seniors in the United States, people in the United States, pay more for their prescription drugs than in any other developed country in the world. And I'm currently working, there's bipartisan legislation that I'm working on that would just close some of the loopholes that are exploited by big pharma when it comes to getting generic drugs to market. So we'll keep you posted about that and look forward to working with you to get that bill over the finish line too. The other thing I wanted to just talk about was ways we can work to make care more affordable for seniors. I think you all know that I have focused on this for a long time. I think you all know that I have experience as a family caregiver myself, so I have some understanding of how balancing all of this can really be a challenge, and a lot of understanding of what the work of caregiving is actually like. It is very rewarding, but it can also be really, really challenging. So I recently joined my colleagues to introduce a bipartisan law that offers a tax cut of up to $5,000 for family caregivers to help pay for their time and their expenses. That's one tangible way we could really work to make a difference for those family caregivers right now who need to be able to finance respite or a little bit of extra care, or at least just have their work recognized in some way, because it obviously means they can't do other kinds of work and limits their income in other ways. And I will also just say that there is an ongoing effort, a more comprehensive one, to strengthen our home and community-based care system. It will require, again, bipartisan agreement moving forward. We weren't able to get it done in 2022, but we continue to focus on ways that would make sure that every American who wants to age at home or has a disability and wants to stay at home has the opportunity to do that. That means strengthening the workforce. It means making sure that caregivers, both family caregivers and professional caregivers, are recognized for the creative and extraordinary work that they do, and recognized in terms of pay, so that we can attract more people to the field and make sure that they can make a family-sustaining career out of being a community and home-based caregiver. So that's a little bit of a report on what we've been able to do, what we still need to work on, and I'll just conclude by saying how much I appreciate the advocacy of people here. You know, this is what a democracy is about. It's about people coming together and making their case to their elected leaders, and their elected leaders know that they are accountable. And that's really, really important as we go forward, to remember that this kind of change happens because we're a democracy, and some of what is at stake moving forward. So with that, I thought maybe what I would do to just kick off discussion is start with a question to you, Christina. You advocate on behalf of seniors. Can you share a bit of context of what it means for Medicare to finally be able to negotiate drug prices and what difference those savings will make for seniors?
Absolutely. So as you said, the people make a big deal about Medicare having the ability to negotiate prescription drug prices, and it has taken decades to get this done, and AARP has been pushing all along the way for Medicare to have that authority. And it's a little confounding why it should be such a big deal, because as you said, I mean, Medicare spends $129 billion a year on prescription drugs, and that's just what Medicare spends. That's not what the individuals spend. So that's a lot of purchasing power.
Right.
And the idea that the government can't use that purchasing power to negotiate better prices is absurd, but I think just is a testament to the power of the big drug companies. So the Inflation Reduction Act and this negotiation of prescription drug prices is going to help the 241,000 people in New Hampshire who are on Medicare Part D, so receive prescription drug coverage through Medicare. So it will put money back in the pockets of people on Medicare and will lower the costs of Medicare. And we all know that Medicare faces really severe funding challenges going forward, and so that is really important. The one challenge is that this is being implemented gradually. So right now, Medicare has identified the first 10 drugs that will be subject to price negotiation, and 32,000 people in New Hampshire rely on those drugs.
Okay.
So it's a substantial part of the population that will benefit.
Good, good. But more work to do, to be sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Maureen, a question to you. As you know, and as I've talked about, I know a little bit about home caregiving. In your work, what are some of the obstacles that you see families face when they are trying to find the time or resources to take care of their loved ones? How can we make caregiving a more sustainable option for more families?
Sure. So I'm gonna have Sue talk about the details on this because she does the day-to-day stuff with people. But when I first started at Easter Seals, I started a research project and I was focusing on seniors, and then I got partway through it and COVID hit, everything went out the window. But my research came back with something that's not surprising to you, and it was on seniors. And the three biggest issues are housing, health, and food. And even when things aren't out of control in their lives with their health, those are the tough things. My father-in-law passed away this past September, and it was unthinkable. It's unthinkable what we had to pay out of pocket to help him through the last days of his life. It was just absurd.
Right.
And then, Sue's, as I said, Sue's gonna talk about the details, but one of the things that we're adopting at Easter Seals is, we did senior housing, affordable.
Right.
So when we think about the research, it's the housing, right?
Right.
And then, we're looking at care coordination, something that folks don't get. And when you think about folks who are living on the edge, folks who are on fixed benefits, oftentimes there's no caregiver. Who's gonna do that?
Right.
Well, we're introducing care coordination, which is something we don't get paid for, but we're doing it.
Right.
And then on that same campus, we can have in-home care, and we have an adult day program. So what we're looking at is creating that center of excellence for seniors to help them to stay in their home as long as they possibly can. They don't have to go anywhere. We stay with them. So when I look at caregivers through my own experience and that of Easter Seals, it's really, if I'm taking care of my parents, how do I work?
Right.
How on earth do I work and take care of my father-in-law, Walter, in his last days? It is just, something that's just horrible to go through as a family.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry about the loss of your
Thank you.
father-in-law, and, but what you're describing, I think, is what so many families try to balance, and the care coordination piece is huge. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit more here.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the biggest struggles for families, honestly, is that there's a lot of systems in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
a lot of help, but navigating through that is really challenging. So to have care coordinators that really looks at the whole person and helps to navigate, because people don't know like where to start.
Yeah.
And just having that kind of person has made a huge difference. That and some flex funds, so
Yeah.
kind of to meet those emergency needs has been really critical. I feel like, you know, caregiving is really taxing and
Yeah.
difficult, so making sure that people have a break has been challenging.
Yeah.
Especially with the workforce challenges.
Yeah.
And we've heard families say even when they have a break, there's really a lack of training for the caregivers.
Right.
Especially family givers who wanna hire individuals and wanna train them.
Yeah.
So I think that that's been another real challenge for
Yeah.
folks.
How can people get trained, or are you able to help family members who want to train somebody else figure out how to do that?
Yeah, so we currently train our own caregivers, and haven't really opened that up to family caregivers, but we definitely would be open to doing
Yeah,
something like
yeah.
that.
No, and it's something I hear a lot about from people, which is I'd love to be helpful as a friend or a neighbor, but I'm not quite sure what to do. And also, if you don't do it frequently, you get rusty
Right.
and you need a refresher. So that's kind of a barrier right there.
How many people are waiting for care when we look at our programs, so?
Oh, gosh, in home care, I mean, it's endless. I mean, there's so much need, you probably know too. There's way more need than we can staff up for. One of the positive things that happened a few months ago is we were able to get a grant through DHHS
Okay.
for workforce, which is great. And in
Yeah.
the last 3 months, we put some effort into marketing of home care
Yeah.
positions, talent acquisition,
Yeah.
and training, and we've been able to increase our workforce by 13 FTEs in 3 months, which is
Okay.
a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
You know, and it's really looking at, you know, retention and what can we do to keep, you know, kind of those paid givers
Right.
In place, and so we're looking at that as well.
Got it. Well, let me follow up further with both Amy and then Eveline, because you both have unique and important experience in caregiving. Can you talk about kind of what the challenges you are that's seeing, and then as we talk about getting this $5,000 tax credit over the finish line, how would that be helpful? And I'll start with you, Amy.
Yeah, I think it's huge. One of the things that we do at Ascendra is I started as a caseworker like 16 years ago, so it's been really fascinating to watch how things have evolved,
Mhm.
changed,
Right.
or become, you know, more in crisis over the years,
Yeah.
actually. But prior to COVID, actually, we've always had a certain amount of our caregivers are what we call identified, and that means that they are a loved one, whether it's a relative or a
Right.
neighbor, who we hire and train to work with that individual, which is a beautiful thing, especially for some adult children. We now are at a point with COVID and then the, you know, caregiving crisis that we've seen, that about 80% of our people are in that space. So they
Okay.
are our loved one, and they've maybe left another job to come
Right.
do this, right? So we know that gives us an idea of where things are at. The choices that people have to make, and this is where, you know, deciding between getting a prescription or picking up groceries when your income has been cut so drastically. I mean,
Yeah.
this, any type of tax credit, I mean, that's gonna be big for people. I think that when we see the cost of everything has gone up the way it has.
Yeah.
And then a caregiving crisis, I love that you touched on, one of the things that kills me, you know, we were successful in New Hampshire, everybody knows, our program is about 95% CFI, so Medicaid.
Yeah.
And as you know, we're underfunded by millions.
Yep.
But had this historic rate increase, which was
Right.
incredible. And with that, we've been able to do a lot of things. But one piece is that we have benefits, we have paid time off. We have so
Mhm.
many people that can't use that
Mhm.
because they don't have anyone to come and fill in.
Yeah.
So that burnout, I mean, that's
Yeah.
what's showing up in our emergency departments, right? We know
Okay.
that with Alzheimer's, you know. So I think anything we can do, we know, you know, through all of our social determinants of health, what happens with those levels of stress and the financial stress. Anything that we can do to not only acknowledge our caregivers and the physical, emotional work that they do, but also to just make life a little easier. I mean, I think both of these pieces of legislation are gonna help with that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
because it's huge.
Thank you. Evelyn?
Okay, where do I begin? Well, I had caregiving thrown at me when my husband had a stroke in 2009, and he was in Mass General and a couple of facilities. When he was released back home to me, I go, what do I do?
Right.
And so fortunately, he was at Hackett Hill, and one of the social workers put me in touch with the adult day program. He had Jason Duchesne, or I think it
Yeah.
was. So I said, okay, what do we need to do? All I could see was dollar signs.
Yeah.
And I was really, really concerned about whether I could keep those payments up. Ron lost his job when he had his stroke, and he lost all of his medical benefits. So he had no insurance, and I panicked on that as
Yeah.
well. Fortunately, I knew someone that worked at Easter Seals, and she said, bring in your resume. She said, I think there might be a place for you. And I got the job in Caring Companions, which is, you know, home care, almost immediately. And I said, oh, thank God. So I was in a good place. My husband was right down the hall. He would toot down with his walker every once in a while and wave. But the good news was, because I was working at Easter Seals, they knew about caregiving. They knew how difficult it was. So if I had to take some time off to take him to a doctor's appointment, or, you know, or he had an emergency and I could take him home or whatever. And they were great about letting me go on a payment plan for the adult day program, which was wonderful. So had I had that credit, it would have helped pay me back a little bit
Yeah.
of the thousands that I paid out for that.
Right.
And continued to do so over the years, but I don't think all employers are that forgiving. So I was in a good place for that. And then he began to fall quite frequently, and we found out he had Parkinson's. And he went back into a facility for rehab, and I got the call that he was not rehabilitatable.
Mm.
I went, ugh, now what do I do?
Do, right.
Yeah, so I talked to the Veterans Home up in Tilton, and I was able to get him into that through a lot of paperwork.
Yeah.
And he ended up being up there for 12 years. So I was a long-distance caregiver, but they couldn't even put a Band-Aid on him without calling me. So I was constantly on the phone with them and making medical decisions all the time. And trying to also be the wife to him on weekends and take him out and do things with him.
Right.
Until he was not transportable anymore. And if he hadn't been a veteran,
Right.
I could never have afforded the care that he needed. I would be paying it to my grave. And it was not easy even to get those benefits. I had to write out a huge essay and do all kinds of paperwork and everything. Finally got the benefits, which was wonderful. So they took care of all of his care. But I always thought, what would I have done if he was not a veteran? And I just can't even imagine, because as difficult as it was for me, I can't even imagine if I didn't have the support of the VA as well. And yeah, it was not something I planned on.
Yep.
So 14 of our 18 years of marriage.
Yeah, yeah. That's a lot. Thank you for talking to us about it. It's such a personal experience, and it's really hard to talk about in public.
Yeah.
I
Thank
have,
you.
s- I have some experience with it, and it can catch you by surprise.
Yes.
So I appreciate your willingness to. I also appreciate your husband's service, and this is just a reminder to anybody who is here or sees any kind of video clip of this. If you know a veteran, please make sure that they reach out to the Veterans Administration to find out about their benefit eligibility. As we all know, we just passed the PACT Act, which now expands health benefits for veterans significantly. And so I just ask everybody who knows a veteran or who's a veteran, pick up the phone, reach out to the VA, find out the services you are eligible for, because our veterans deserve the care that your husband received and more. And so, thank you for mentioning that too.
Can I just mention
Yeah.
one thing? Thank you for your story. And we now have a veterans program here at Easter Seals as well,
Okay.
Veterans Count.
Yes, that's
And we
right.
provide that care coordination, absolutely follow through with the VA. But today, we do have that.
Yeah.
Because we do know that whatever it is you're trying to get through, it's really hard. So we have that care coordination for free.
Yeah.
It wasn't in place at the time.
It
Yeah.
wasn't.
Yeah.
It's a long way.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
were just beginning it at the time, as I remember, but, yeah, and the Veterans Count program is important and unique, and,
Pretty remarkable.
yeah, it's a pretty remarkable thing. So, Bill, I know that the 211 helpline does incredible work connecting Granite Staters with a variety of resources that they need. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing from seniors, what 211 is hearing from seniors about everything from affording medications to caregivers?
I'd be happy to, Senator. First off, good morning, and thanks for asking us to come. You also know my own story with being a caregiver in the family.
Yeah,
And as a veteran myself, thank you for all you're doing here.
thank you.
Maureen, the story you told about the seniors and the crises that people are facing, the data is spot on.
Yeah,
We looked at last year's data, just for seniors in general. For anybody who's not aware of it, 211 is an information and referral service. People call us and we refer them someplace for help. It's an anonymous service. Okay? We ask three things. First, are you or has anybody in your family ever served? You're a veteran. We were the first organization in New Hampshire who adopted Ask the Question 15 years ago. Then we ask age and gender. That's it.
Yep.
So that's part of what provides the benefit. Last year, the number one reason seniors called 211 was to get their taxes done for free under the VITA program.
right,
In fact, seniors represent more than 50% of our customers in
Right.
the VITA program each year.
do you want to
Sure.
say what VITA stands
Voluntary
here?
Income Tax Assistance Program.
Right.
And done by volunteers, so that's still the most popular reason people call 211 this time of year.
Yeah,
Utility assistance, homelessness issues, housing, public assistance, food, right up there. There were over 12,000 calls to 211 last year from seniors,
Yeah.
just for those reasons. Regarding the things we're talking about today, helping understand Medicaid, medical care expenses, Medicaid information counseling, health insurance premium expenses, looking for help getting those paid, helping getting their prescriptions paid.
Yeah.
I've got a data sheet I'll do with your staff
Okay.
afterwards. We can always do more, right? So as people are calling Easter Seals, or they're calling Veterans Count, or the VA, if you remember nothing else, if you don't know where to refer somebody for help, tell them to call 211.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're here for. So that's
Okay.
just a quick synopsis.
Yeah.
But the data supports everything you're saying.
yeah, just struggling to get the essentials paid for.
Yeah, I think, and across the board, I think, not only post-pandemic, but the struggle over basic needs right now. And it's housing, it's childcare, it's fuel assistance, it's food assistance, everybody's seeing it.
Yeah, yeah. And on a number of fronts, there has begun to be better bipartisan recognition of the need for more housing, the need for support for childcare throughout the country, and the need, to make sure people know that there are ways that they can lower their fuel bills and get tax credits for it at the same time. That was the other thing that the Inflation Reduction Act did. And sometimes, it's almost like we need a little bit of, it's not almost like, we need a little bit of coordination there too, because figuring out what you can practically do in your own space to lower your fuel bills and get a tax credit in the process can be a little bit daunting. But we've made some progress there. I mean, one of the things that's very clear from your comments, Eveline, and others, is we need paid family and medical leave. And that's, again, something we're beginning to see better bipartisan recognition of. Figuring out how to get it forward and how to get it across the finish line is something that we're continuing to struggle with. But increasingly, people understand when you have a loved one who suddenly has a major medical event, you're going to need time off from work. And we also know that employers who are able to provide that kind of leave and time often have much lower turnover, much better experience as employers, but we have to make it financially feasible. So we're working on that. Christina, I wanted to just touch base with you too, because I've introduced legislation to strengthen the 1-800 Medicare hotline. Can you talk a little bit about the hotline and how it helps seniors and caregivers and how we could strengthen it?
Absolutely. So we know that there are 168,000 family caregivers in New Hampshire right now.
Yeah.
And that's, and we know that almost everybody either is a family caregiver, was a family caregiver, or will be.
Will be one, right?
So
Right.
this is something that affects everybody. We also know that about half of those people have to do some sort of care coordination. So what Evelyn was talking about, what we've heard about today. And right now, 1-800 Medicare exists, so
Yeah.
people can call and get assistance 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's a great resource. But right now, family members can, if they call and they haven't filled out a specific form, Medicare isn't allowed to talk to them
Right,
about their loved
right.
one's care and needs. So one of the things that this bill will do is to help to spread the word that it's possible, that if you fill out a form, then you can be the one who's calling 1-800
Right.
Medicare to get help. Because you can't expect somebody who really needs care to be able to do that advocacy on their own.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that we can do to help caregivers,
Right.
and this is a wonderful resource
Yeah.
that would be provided.
No, my siblings and I are doing a little bit of caregiving right now, and if one of us could be the person who's in charge of the the physician schedule, that would be a huge, just break instead of kind of having to sit with our loved one while they make the call, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. Anything else that we haven't talked about in terms of caregiving or the challenges that programs like Easter Seals or your organization have? Anything else we should be touching on?
I mean, I think, you've touched on, not everybody has an email and somebody's so wonderful.
Yeah.
That's just the advocacy aspect of it, and having that's huge because, and your program that you're doing, it's a full-time job, just
Yeah.
as you were saying. What we see with Medicaid, CFI participants is a lot of them might not have that advocate. And what happens if they don't have that? I mean, 8 years ago, I had a traumatic brain injury and spent a lot of time rehabbing. And I remember the thing that killed me afterwards was that all of the stuff that I had to fill out because I was out of work, all of the things
Yeah.
were these forms online, or making a phone call. I lost my speech. I couldn't.
Yeah.
And I think if I didn't have
Right.
family or support, which we see plenty of people that don't have that, what happens to
Right.
those people?
Yeah.
And we know what happens, and
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Yeah.
So I think, right now there's a bill for, looking at community health workers, but any way that we can really, that's another place we can take some of that stress off of caregivers, like you were saying, somebody just to coordinate the doctor visits, right?
Yeah.
If we can take some of that stress off of those caregivers, that's huge,
Yeah.
So that's just something I always worry about, is those folks that don't have somebody to advocate.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and I worry about people who are able to coordinate their own care, but perhaps not comfortable with the online world.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's another kind of challenge that I think is real and not limited. As you just pointed out, it isn't necessarily an age thing.
Yes,
right?
and I'm so glad you mentioned
Yeah.
that, because there was, DHS put out the, so it's workforce retention and recruitment.
Right.
One of the things that we've done is we were able to get 100 tablets, and we identified 100 of our caregivers that lived in areas
Yeah.
whether it was just like a confidence issue,
Yeah.
didn't feel comfortable with technology, and they have full training and support. And the idea in our mind is that it gives them not only those skills, but that confidence, because sometimes there's like an intimidation
Yeah,
thing there,
right,
right?
yeah.
So the access piece, so that's going to open up access also for the clients they serve.
Right.
And in their home,
Right,
right? And
right.
for training and real-time support
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
So more of that, I think,
Yeah.
would be amazing.
That's great. That's great.
that's
Yeah.
one thing, the Digital Equity Act.
Yeah.
Was passed, and so there are hundreds of millions of dollars coming into New Hampshire and states all over. And there's a Broadband Act that is about
Right.
the physical infrastructure, and then the Digital Equity Act is about making access meaningful.
Right.
Because, I just had dinner with some friends who have known me since I was born.
Right.
They're 90 years old and 93 years old. One of them has a smartphone, one of them doesn't. And even the one with the smartphone, they're just not comfortable.
Right.
They don't know, just that what we all know is you go to a website, you see those 3 lines in a row, that's what you click
Yeah.
to find out what's on the website. So it takes a lot for
Yeah.
somebody to be comfortable. So there's a plan that has been drafted in New Hampshire that will help with affordability, with getting people devices,
Yeah.
and then getting people training.
Yeah.
So that they know how to use those devices.
Right.
And not just training, but ongoing technical support.
Right.
Because you can't just show somebody once how
Right.
to, access Uber even.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
And every time there's an update and things change a little
Yeah.
bit, you're kind of like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
no,
but just
that's
to
all,
get
just
it,
that
yeah.
that's a really important development. And, I think people focus on the physical aspect of it, the physical
Yeah.
infrastructure, and that's costly and is really important for such a rural state. But this meaningful access
Right.
is critical and difficult.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that exists, that New Hampshire's taking it seriously, that the federal government is providing such support.
Right, we're working to reauthorize, hasn't happened yet, there's connectivity, an affordability
Right.
piece of the,
The Affordable Connectivity
yeah,
Program. Yeah.
and I think it was part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We need to reauthorize, because it's
Yeah.
been so popular, because there have been so many people who qualify for it. So that's the affordability piece, but the support and the ongoing comfort level with technology and the access is really important. My crack staff is standing up, which tells me that I'm supposed to wrap up soonish, but we got a few more minutes. If you could talk to people throughout New Hampshire about how to keep advocating for seniors in particular, but just for community-based health, what advice, and I'll start with you, Christina, because obviously AARP does a lot of nonpartisan advocacy, just reaching out and explaining kind of needs, but what has worked, what doesn't work, what would you encourage people to do?
Well, we had a huge success last year, a few huge successes
Yeah.
at the state level in terms of the rate increases that Amy referred to, the Medicaid expansion,
Yeah.
maintaining that for the next 7 years, I think, 9
Okay,
years,
yeah.
something like that. And something called the System of Care for Healthy Aging. And that is a bill that is hoping to actually create a system, because we talk about the long-term
Yeah.
care system, but it's not. It's
Right.
just pieces here and there. So one of the things that we want to do is ensure that that bill gets implemented, because
Right.
it'll be done in stages, and we just need to hold people accountable. So we are trying to spread the word about that, so that people maintain pressure on the people who need to
Yeah.
be implementing these things. And so we make it easy for people to make their voices heard
Right.
at the state level, which is super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What else?
If I could
Yeah.
add one from a personal experience standpoint, Senator, I think that one of the things we're all talking about is people are often thrust into caregiving during crisis.
Right.
Something happened to a loved one, old, young, grandparent, child. As all of the development of systems, is there an opportunity to inject some level of awareness
Yeah.
to adult children thinking about retirement and dealing with aging parents, to somebody battling a chronic illness, to, what
Yeah.
are some of the things that you might want to have in place?
Right.
Just in case something happens.
Yeah.
So, and it's tough. These are the tough conversations
Yeah.
nobody ever wants to have, but.
Right.
Well, I know that AARP has done some, focus group type, events for caregivers, and has, a whole list of resources for them, which was very, very helpful in, passing out to other people. And they asked me to speak at, I think it was Blake's. Remember Blake's?
Oh, yeah? Yeah.
Yeah. And everybody was saying, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you have this, because I knew nothing about it.
Right.
And I said, I'm not a caregiver anymore, but boy, I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
And AARP is a wonderful resource for that.
I think having local events and then sometimes transportation, a lot of times
Mm,
transportation
yeah.
is a barrier, right?
Right.
So how do we get people to the events? And then there's that digital divide, right? And then people,
Right.
and they can't access it via Zoom and they can't get there. So I think there's a whole group kind of left out from some of the conversation. So we're really trying to figure out how we can provide better access with transportation
Yeah.
and ongoing training.
One of the things we're working on with the various veteran service organizations is standardizing the kind of vetting that happens for volunteer drivers for veterans. You know, this is something DAV does enormous work with, but volunteers who come forward who say, I'd love to help transport, for instance, veterans to their medical appointments, the background check backlog has been so significant that, you know, if you're eager to volunteer, you're going to go someplace else. So we've made some improvements here in state on that, but we're working to standardize that, and that gets to, you know, how do we streamline the experience of being a volunteer? How do we provide the kind of training that a friend or neighbor might be very willing, you know, to take so that they could be that extra set of hands. You know, I always said early on, you know, our son Ben is now 35, but when he was 5 or 6, I realized that, you know, if my husband was traveling for business and we ran out of milk, I couldn't just ask a neighbor to pop over and watch the kids while I ran to the store, right? It meant I had to bundle everybody up, including Ben, and go out on my own. And it's that kind of community capacity. Some people are going to need significantly more training than just a little bit of familiarity with the equipment or the individual. But other people, you know, the more that we do this in the community, the more people are going to be familiar with how to help somebody, how to spell a caregiver for an hour or for a trip to the grocery store. And that's the other piece of this. The more people know what options are out there, the more people share their experiences, and the more supports we provide, I think the stronger the whole network can get. And we need to professionalize it, but we also need to make it possible for people to volunteer and help.
Yeah, it's a network, it's a system of care.
Yeah.
One piece, whether it's, you know, adult day or it's, you know, 211, it's a system. We can't just fix one part.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to work together on it. And elevating those stories. We have these silent heroes going into homes, right?
Right.
That nobody knows about. And I think whether you're lucky enough to just age and then need some help, or one day, you know, you fall down your basement stairs, like whatever it is that you need, just having people understand those stories and relating to them. Like get those stories out there, because it's such important work.
That's
Right.
the most important thing, is elevating your voice,
Yeah.
humanizing it, and hopefully getting through to the other side about what's going on. And thank you for that.
Well, I get to elevate the voices of people in New Hampshire, and there's no better job, because people in New Hampshire speak up and are direct, and believe in citizen participation, right? So it's a particularly special place to do this work. I think the other observation I would make about caregiving, and Amy, it's kind of to your point, we have been blessed in my home with an anchor caregiver for Ben, who has been with him for 34 of his 35 years,
my
which is
goodness.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
And she is not only a strong and roll with the punches kind of person who, you know, she had served for a year as a medic stateside during the Vietnam War. And that had been her training, right? And so she really brought that kind of capacity to the job, and she also helped us raise our daughter, and, you know, she's been a part of our family. But she's really creative. This is a job that requires creativity and, you know, and skill, and I think she would tell you it's been very rewarding. But it's a hard thing to replicate, you know, because you need to be able to support caregivers with family sustaining wages. And this is She gets her health care through the VA because she's a veteran, which made some of the finances of all of where she would work and whether she had health insurance, manageable. But it's really important just to remember that the career of caregiving can be a really rewarding one if we can finally step forward and recognize it for what it is. Yeah.
Amen.
This is, yeah.
Nicely stated.
Okay, gang, thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you.
Thank
this
you.
much time. I really appreciate it. Appreciate what you do.